If you've gone on Amazon Prime Instant Video recently to watch Tom and Jerry cartoons from 70 years ago...
Who hasn't?
you may have been shocked to see that Amazon has added a disclaimer to the Cat and Mouse classic warning that what you're about to watch is racist.
The disclaimer reads, Tom and Jerry shorts may depict some ethnic and racial prejudices that were once commonplace in American society. Such depictions were wrong then and are wrong today. While the following does not represent the Warner Brothers' view on today's society, these cartoons are being presented as they were originally created, because to do otherwise would be the same as claiming that these prejudices never existed.
So what's so racist about Tom and Jerry anyway? Well, most of it pertains to the character Mammy Two Shoes.
Oh, wow.
Who was basically the African-American maid of the house that Tom and Jerry live in, who often got caught in the middle of their scuffles. There's also some blackface and some pretty ignorant depictions of indigenous peoples in there too.
So basically the same shit that was racist in just about every cartoon from the time. Mammy Two Shoes is just one example of the mammy archetype that appeared in early 20th century film and literature, where the character was generally an overweight black woman of below average intelligence, wearing domestic servant clothing and speaking in a Ebonic dialect.
By the time the civil rights movement started picking up steam in the 1960s, MGM decided to go back and alter the original 1940s cartoons, replacing Mammy Two Shoes with a white woman with a different voice. In the 1980s, when Turner acquired the Tom and Jerry property, they brought back the original versions.
Yeah, fuck it!
But replaced Mammy's voice with a more neutral dialect.
Okay,
and that's
fair.
the version that airs on Turner channels like Cartoon Network to this day.
Alright, yeah, I remember the original one from watching the old ones. However, in most other countries, the original versions have remained unchanged that whole time. The obvious reason for this is that the offensiveness of the mammy stereotype depends a lot on context. Most other countries don't have the same fucked up history of African slavery, Jim Crow laws, minstrel shows, lynchings, and so on that we have here in the States.
And along those same lines, I think most Americans under the age of 60 probably lack the real world context to really understand why Mammy Two Shoes is a racist character.
It's the same with blackface. For non-Americans or younger people, it's easy to ask, why is painting my face black racist? But in the context of old minstrel shows and advertisements and early TV shows, it's easy to see why blackface is very offensive to black Americans, especially those who are over the age of 70 that remember the pre-civil rights era.
And the fact that several decades have passed and that the context of the racial jokes is so far removed from our own time is probably why Warner Brothers and Amazon are okay with showing the original versions along with the disclaimer. Warner's actually been quietly releasing original versions of their old cartoons for a couple years now on DVD, usually in the big multi-disc like ultimate collections that cost a bunch of money and are only really for hardcore fans.
I have a couple of them. These collections include similar disclaimers basically saying that the cartoons you're about to watch are a product of their time, and basically saying everything in the Amazon disclaimer. In the Tom and Jerry Spotlight collection, Whoopi Goldberg introduces the cartoons by explaining that Tom and Jerry, as iconic and important and influential as it is, includes racial humor that was normal at the time but is now very outdated. But that to erase Mammy Two Shoes and other various examples of old school racism would be like pretending they never existed, which would be wrong. It would also be messing with some of the best animation of the golden era. This stuff is truly art.
Yeah, it's really fucking amazing that they were doing this in the 1940s. And that's really the issue here. It's easy to discard TV shows or movies for being offensive and racist if they suck, but it's a little more complicated when these shows and movies are hugely influential, historically and culturally important, and basically laid the groundwork for what we have today.
The best you can do is hope that the person watching understands that they can appreciate hard work and innovation while also recognizing that things used to totally suck for minorities in this country and kind of still do.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and one aspect of that was racist on-screen portrayals in media.
Now, Tom and Jerry is definitely not the only old cartoon guilty of imagery and portrayals that would never fly today. Looney Tunes, aka Merry Melodies cartoons, have seen minor censorship for offensive material since at least the 1960s, most of which simply involved editing out small segments and keeping the rest.
I was recently at Six Flags, and still on the TVs there they play old Looney Tunes, and one of them had like a really big-lipped brown Eskimo. It was pretty bad. They're just like, here you go, while you're waiting in line for X2, watch this racist cartoon. But there are also some World War II era Bugs Bunny cartoons that are blatantly racist towards Japanese people, such as Bugs Bunny Nips the Nips and the Ductators, which have only appeared on TV in recent years on Cartoon Network's Toonheads documentary series in an episode about World War II cartoons.
Speedy Gonzales has always divided audiences, with many criticizing the Latin American stereotypes presented in the cartoons. The Mexican characters in the Speedy cartoons were generally presented as lazy and unintelligent, and when Cartoon Network gained the exclusive rights to Looney Tunes in 1999, they shelved all of the Speedy Gonzales appearances. That is, until a Hispanic American rights group petitioned to get him back on the air, calling him a cultural icon.
Yeah, apparently Speedy had always been a pretty popular character in Latin America, despite what American political correctness would assume.
Definitely not what I would have guessed, but yeah. And there are 11 Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes cartoons from the 1930s and 40s that have been completely out of official circulation since 1968 because of the racial stereotypes in them. Though Warner has said in recent years that there are plans to release them soon. They just need to do it.
Racism's done. Bring back the cartoon.
They screened them all at New York Comic Con 2010.
Nice.
And they said if they found the right way to do it, they did want to release them.
There's a place close by in here in LA that used to do screenings of old cartoons, and they would show stuff like this. It was pretty interesting, and they would tell the stories behind it and stuff. It was cool. And obviously, Disney has also seen its share of controversy and censorship over the years for material that doesn't jive with modern sensibilities. In the 1930s, they released Cannibal Capers, which was basically a bunch of African tribal stereotypes dancing around and speaking through mouth clicking.
And then Mickey in Arabia, in which a big fat sultan character forces himself on Minnie Mouse, and then Mickey stops him and they get chased around by scimitar-wielding locals.
Jesus. And then in Trader Mickey, Mickey and Pluto get captured by African cannibals and thrown into a stew. But the cannibals have a change of heart and let them go once Mickey teaches them how to play jazz music.
Oh my God.
And again with the cannibalism, in Mickey's Man Friday, Mickey befriends a native African and saves him from being eaten. He then bestows upon him a new name and tells him he's gonna be Mickey's sidekick now.
This is insane. And then in Mickey's Melodrama, Mickey and friends put on a stage production of Uncle Tom's Cabin in blackface. Yeah, Mickey Mouse had blackface on.
You're not gonna see that at Disneyland.
No.
And in the Disney version of The Three Little Pigs, one of the Big Bad Wolf's various attempts to disguise himself to get into the pig's house is dressing as a straight up Jewish caricature to trick the pigs into opening the door. Get the big nose, it looks like something out of Nazi propaganda film.
By the 1940s, Disney had mastered the art of racial caricatures, and in the classic, groundbreaking Fantasia, one segment featured a black female centaur named Sunflower, who is basically the servant/slave of the pretty white centaur girl. For some reason, they decided to remove that part for the 1960s re-release.
Can't imagine why.
No.
In Dumbo, the titular flying elephant meets a group of crows who are basically jive-talking, cigar-smoking black stereotypes. And the leader crow is named Jim Crow. Ugh. Sample lyric, I be done seen bout everything when I see an elephant fly.
Wow.
You gotta sing it.
No.
I be done seen bout.
And then World War II happened, and Disney gladly contributed their expertise to the war propaganda genre, starting with 1943's Education for Death, the making of the Nazi. Which wasn't necessarily racist, but it did dehumanize the entire German population for the purposes of propaganda. Also, it's just really weird seeing a bunch of Nazi imagery rendered in that classic Disney style.
It's really fucking weird.
Yeah.
You get like all the leaders of the Third Reich and like the iconic Disney look.
But again, it was the time. Like, we were at war with Germany
sure.
and Japan, and stuff like this obviously was gonna happen.
The US government clearly like went to them. They're like, hey, people like you, would you help us like raise money for war bonds? And they're like, well, fuck yeah. In Der Führer's face, we get Donald Duck living in Nazi Germany, heiling Hitler, wearing a Nazi uniform, and helping out the Nazi war effort. Yes, Donald Duck is a Nazi. JK, it's all a bad dream at the end, but Emperor Hirohito of Japan is in this one, in his standard World War II era depiction, aka extremely racist, and Mussolini is also there just being a really Italian.
Donald's American patriotism was vindicated in Commando Duck, in which Donald goes through basic US Army training and gets sent to take out a bunch of Japanese soldiers. Cue the Japanese caricatures. What's crazy about these World War II Disney cartoons is that the animation in them is fantastic, but still probably not gonna appear on the Disney Channel Marathon anytime soon.
Yeah, and the first one, the one about Nazis, is beautiful. It's like, they put a lot of hard work into that. It's a great piece of animation, but yeah, it's just weird. It's weird watching that. Now, after the war, Disney returned their attention to black people with Song of the South, in which a former slave sings zippity-doo-dah and happily tells kids stories while walking around on the plantation that formerly enslaved him. It's pretty hard to find a copy since Disney has tried its damnedest to erase this movie from history, but ironically, Disneyland Splash Mountain, based on the movie, is still a very popular ride.
In 1953, Disney decided that they hadn't stereotyped Native Americans enough, so in Peter Pan, we get to find out via a fun little musical number, what makes the red band red? It's because a long time ago, an Indian kissed a girl and blushed, and now they're all red-skinned. The story is told while a peace pipe is passed around.
Yeah, I like the assumption that Indians looked just like us before, and then one of them turned red, and now they're all red.
Yeah.
And then in 1955's Lady and the Tramp, we meet a couple of Siamese cats who are, you guessed it, Classic Asian stereotypes.
Yeah.
They sing a song, "We Are Siamese," with a really shitty Asian accent while gongs and bells and other like stereotypical Asian instruments play. Yeah, it's really fucking.
So I guess you would be offended by the movie Kung Fu Panda then, Elliot?
very offended.
Yeah. And then another Siamese cat appeared 22 years later in The Aristocats, playing the piano with chopsticks while singing what seems like a random string of Asian words.
He's like, Wong Tong Kung Fu.
Oh my god. But it was the original keyboard cat then.
Yeah. The Aristocats one is way worse than the Lady and the Tramp one. Because it's not even like, they didn't even attempt. They're just like, let's throw in an Asian cat. Okay.
Sure. They were just being fair.
Now, since their racist heyday in the 1930s through 60s, Disney has calmed down quite a bit with the stereotypes, but they've still found time here or there for a little bit of racism, like with the merchant at the beginning of Aladdin, who in the theatrical version sang the line, "Where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home."
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, they changed that for the home video release. I can't imagine why.
Yeah. Outside of the Warner and Disney cartoons of yesteryear, there's been plenty of questionable racist depictions in classic cartoons like Betty Boop, Popeye, the Flintstones,
Oh yeah.
and pretty much every animated production from back then that ran long enough for the writers to say, hey, I think it's time we mix things up a bit by throwing in a slant-eyed buck-toothed Chinaman into the mix. It's kind of amazing how that gag and blackface was a joke that never got old for people back then. It's kind of like farts today.
Yeah, blackface was the fart joke of the 1930s. Like, anytime it happened in a cartoon, it was like, oh my god, I didn't think of that. Like, it's Mickey, but he's got a black face.
It's a regular knee slapper.
Now, probably the best / worst example of this is a little short, and I don't know what company made it, but it's from 1941. It's called Scrub Me Mama with a Boogie Beat, which somehow manages to cram every early 20th century black stereotype into a fun little 7-minute musical number. I couldn't find anything mainstream from that era that made me WTF nearly as hard as this one. It's got shoe shining and like fat old mammy characters doing laundry and like barbershops and like their lips are half their face. It's fucking crazy.
But anyways, like we said before, as shitty and wrong as this kind of outdated casual racism is, it's very much a product of its time, and we generally agree that trying to erase this stuff from history is the wrong way to deal with it. You can still appreciate the hard work that people put into this animation and their contributions to the art form, and hate the racist content that their work contains.
I mean, that goes for appreciating pretty much anything from the past. People have been treating other people like shit since the dawn of man, but you can still go to Rome and marvel at just how fucking awesome the Colosseum is, and you don't have to feel bad that like thousands and thousands of people were basically murdered inside there. You can separate that. Yeah. And I mean, the same goes for animation of the early 20th century. It's the beginning of an art form, it's very important, and you can separate the good from the bad.
I'm glad that they took the stance of, you know, this is wrong, but we're gonna put it out anyway because we respect the history of the cartoon.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it right. And by the way, a lot of these you can't view on any other means except for YouTube. A lot of this exists on YouTube. So if you want to check it out, like look up that stuff on YouTube, because honestly right now one of the only places you can see stuff like this.
So what's the most racist thing you've ever seen in a cartoon?
But anything on Family Guy pretty much these days.
Yeah, but they're like, Family Guy's like trying to push buttons. Like you see stuff like that in cartoons now, and it's on purpose.
Yeah, they're doing it to be like ironic and doing it as satire. But yeah, if you've seen a incredibly racist cartoon that we didn't mention here, put it in the comments below and we'll watch it.
Yeah.
So there you go. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything really much else to say about this topic.
I don't know. I feel like I've now become more racist just by watching all of these videos. So
we're sorry.
Yeah, sorry. We're sorry.
We're sorry.